No one believed 10-year-old Noah Wilson when he claimed to witness Charles Whitaker, Forestdale's wealthiest resident, push his wheelchair-bound daughter off Eagle Point Cliff. Adults exchanged worried glances, classmates snickered, and police dismissed him as an attention-seeking child with an overactive imagination. Even as Charles tearfully reported Maddie missing in a tragic sailing accident, Noah alone knew the terrible truth. But what began with a boy's desperate sketches of what he'd seen would unravel a web of abuse, corruption, and murder that had festered beneath the town's surface for years. When a mysterious drawing appeared in Noah's sketchbook with 3 scrawled words, "I'm not dead," it sparked a dangerous quest that would prove how the most powerful voices sometimes come from those society finds easiest to silence. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The cool ocean breeze ruffled Noah's dark curls as he hunched over his sketchpad, hidden behind a cluster of jagged rocks at the cliff's edge. His pencil moved swiftly across the paper, capturing the graceful arc of seagulls diving toward the waves below. 10-year-old Noah had slipped away from his 5th-grade class during their coastal field trip, not out of rebellion but necessity. James had been flicking the back of his ears all morning, whispering taunts that the teacher couldn't hear. "Find your own spot, Wilson," James had sneered. "Nobody wants to see your stupid bird drawings anyway." So Noah had wandered off, finding solace in this secluded nook where the limestone cliff jutted out over the churning Pacific. Here, protected by wind-carved rocks, he could lose himself in his artwork without worrying about James finding him. "Tori," squeak caught his attention first, a faint metallic sound, rhythmic and persistent, coming from the narrow path that wound along the cliff edge. Noah lowered his sketchpad, peering cautiously around his rocky sanctuary. The path was barely visible from his hiding spot, but he could make out movement. A wheelchair. The gleaming silver frame caught the sunlight as a man in an expensive-looking suit pushed it forward. Inside sat a girl who looked about Noah's age, her honey-blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore a blue dress that Noah thought looked too fancy for a cliff visit. The man pushing the wheelchair was tall and imposing with silver-streaked dark hair and the confident walk of someone used to being in charge. "It's beautiful here, isn't it, Maddie?" the man said, his voice carrying on the breeze. His tone was soft, but something about it made Noah's skin prickle. "I thought you'd appreciate the view one last time." The girl, Maddie, didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice trembled. "Dad, I want to go home now. Please." "We will soon," the man said, stopping the wheelchair at a particularly narrow section of the path. "This is for the best. You won't feel pain anymore." Noah's heart began to race. Something was wrong, very wrong. He should leave, run back to his class, tell someone. But his body remained frozen, crouched behind the rocks. "Daddy, please." Maddie's voice cracked. "I didn't tell anyone. I swear." The man, her father, didn't respond. Instead, he placed both hands firmly on the handles of the wheelchair and looked out at the ocean. His face was completely expressionless, like stone. Then, with a calculated shove, he pushed the wheelchair forward. Noah watched in horror as the wheelchair tipped over the edge. Maddie's scream tore through the air, high-pitched and terrified, before being swallowed by the crash of waves below. The man stood motionless at the cliff's edge, looking down. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, as if he'd just tossed a pebble into the water instead of his own daughter. The man's head turned sharply in Noah's direction, eyes narrowing as he scanned the rocky outcropping. Noah pressed himself flat against the rock, heart hammering so loudly he was certain it would give him away. When he dared to look again, the man was walking briskly back down the path, straightening his tie as if completing a business transaction. The moment the man disappeared from view, Noah's paralysis broke. He scrambled to his feet, abandoning his sketchbook, and ran as fast as his legs would carry him back toward the section of beach where his class was gathered. "Help!" Noah shouted as he approached the group, his voice cracking with fear. "Someone pushed a girl off the cliff in a wheelchair. We have to help her." His classmates turned to stare, confusion written across their faces. Ms. Peterson, his science teacher, rushed over, her brow furrowed with concern. "Noah Wilson, where have you been? We've been looking everywhere for you." She grabbed his shoulders. "What are you talking about? Calm down." A man pushed a girl in a wheelchair off the cliff. Noah pointed frantically back toward where he'd been hiding. "I saw it happen. We have to call the police." Ms. Peterson exchanged a look with Mr. Taylor, the other supervising teacher. It was a look Noah recognized, the one adults shared when they thought a child was making things up. "Noah," Ms. Peterson said carefully, "that's a very serious thing to say. Are you sure you didn't just imagine this?" "I didn't imagine it." Noah's voice rose with frustration. "She screamed. Her name was Maddie. Her dad pushed her." A ripple of whispers spread through his classmates. James snickered. "Wilson's lost it. Probably been reading too many of those mystery comics." "You need to calm down," Mr. Taylor said firmly. "We're going to head back to the bus now, and when we get to school, we'll sort this out." No one believed him. Not his teachers, not his classmates. They all thought he was making it up for attention, or that he'd confused reality with imagination. Noah felt tears of frustration burning behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall, not in front of James and the others. As the class was shepherded toward the buses, Noah broke away. He sprinted back toward the cliff, ignoring Ms. Peterson's calls for him to return. He had to find proof. He had to show them he wasn't lying. The sun was sinking lower in the sky by the time Noah reached the spot where it happened. He peered cautiously over the edge, half expecting to see the wheelchair crashed on the rocks below. But there was nothing, just waves crashing against the cliff base and a tangle of brush and driftwood. Determined, Noah followed a narrow, dangerous path down the cliff face, using roots and rocks as handholds. He slipped several times, scraping his knees and palms. By the time he reached the bottom, his school clothes were torn and dirty. The fading daylight made it hard to see. Noah pulled out a small flashlight he kept on his keychain and swept its beam across the rocky shore. There was no wheelchair, no Maddie, just sand, rocks, and lapping waves. Had the tide already washed everything away? Then his light caught something. A broken branch recently snapped, and beside it disturbed brush like something had crashed through. Noah pushed the foliage aside and found a deep groove in the sand, as if something heavy had been dragged. He followed the trail until it disappeared at the water's edge. The ocean below was calm, its surface reflecting the amber glow of the setting sun. No evidence of the horror he'd witnessed remained. For a brief, dizzying moment, Noah wondered if he had imagined it after all, but he knew what he saw. He knew it was real. When Noah finally returned home, his parents were frantic. The school had called hours ago, reporting him missing after he'd run off. His mother alternated between hugging him tightly and scolding him through tears, while his father stood with his arms crossed, disappointment etched into his features. "I'm sorry," Noah mumbled, though he wasn't really. Not when something so much worse had happened. "But Mom, Dad, I saw something terrible. A man pushed his daughter off the cliff in her wheelchair." His parents exchanged that same look his teachers had shared earlier. "Noah," his father began, but Noah cut him off. "I'm not making it up. Her name was Maddie, and her dad pushed her wheelchair right over the edge. I heard her scream." "That's enough," his father said firmly. "Go to your room. We'll talk about this in the morning when you've calmed down." Defeated, Noah trudged up to his room. But instead of going to bed, he went straight to his grandmother's room. Granny May had moved in with them last year after her stroke, and she was the only one who ever really listened to Noah. Granny May was sitting in her rocking chair by the window, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She looked up as Noah entered, her weathered face immediately registering concern. "What's wrong, my boy? You look like you've seen a ghost." Noah sank onto the floor beside her chair and told her everything. The man in the suit, Maddie in the wheelchair, the push, the scream, how no one believed him. Granny May listened without interruption, her knitting needles falling still in her lap. When he finished, she reached out and placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. "I believe you," she said simply. Relief crashed over Noah like a wave. Someone believed him. He wasn't crazy. But Noah, Granny Mae continued, her voice low and serious, this is dangerous business. If what you saw is true, then that man has done something terrible, and he won't want anyone to know about it. I have to tell the police, Noah insisted. And you will, Granny Mae said. But you need to be careful. Powerful men can make anything disappear, but the truth always rots its way back up, like a body in shallow ground. She squeezed his shoulder. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise, Noah whispered. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Maddie's face, hearing her scream. The next morning, the local news was abuzz with a story. Charles Whitaker, prominent businessman and philanthropist, had reported his daughter Madison missing after a tragic sailing accident. The news showed Charles, immaculately dressed in a suit that Noah recognized with a chill, his face a mask of grief as he pleaded for any information about his beloved Maddie. She's the light of my life, Charles said, his voice breaking convincingly. As cameras flashed, please, if anyone saw anything, come forward. I just want my little girl back. Noah stared at the TV in shock. Sailing accident? It was a lie. A complete lie. And there was Maddie's face on the screen. The same girl he'd seen pushed off the cliff. Her school photo showed a solemn-faced child with serious eyes and the faintest hint of a smile. That evening, Noah noticed a black car parked across from their house. It hadn't been there before. As he peered through the blinds, he saw a man in sunglasses sitting behind the wheel, seemingly watching their home. The next day at school, Noah opened his backpack to find his drawings of the cliff scene missing. All of them. Someone had taken them while his backpack sat unattended in the coat room. People were beginning to look at him strangely, teachers, neighbors, even his parents. He'd overheard his mother on the phone with someone saying, "He's been under a lot of stress lately. Overactive imagination. We're thinking of taking him to see someone." They thought he was losing his mind. But Noah knew what he saw, and somewhere out there, Maddie needed someone to tell the truth. 3 weeks had passed since that day at the cliff. 3 weeks of nightmares, of adults exchanging worried glances over his head, of classmates whispering that Noah Wilson had finally cracked. But worst of all was the knowledge that Maddie's father was getting away with it, being celebrated as a grieving parent while his daughter's true fate remained hidden. Noah had started following Charles Whitaker. It was risky and probably stupid, but he couldn't just sit around doing nothing. After school, instead of heading home, he would bike to the wealthy part of town where the Whitaker mansion stood behind ornate iron gates. On this particular afternoon, Noah had positioned himself behind a large oak tree across the street, sketchbook in hand as a cover story in case anyone questioned his presence. But he wasn't drawing birds today. He was watching Charles Whitaker emerge from his house, dressed in another immaculate suit, his silver-streaked hair perfectly styled. Charles walked to his Mercedes, but instead of getting in, he stood beside it as another vehicle approached. A black SUV with heavily tinted windows. The driver's window rolled down, and Charles handed over a manila envelope. The exchange took less than 10 seconds, and then the SUV drove away. Noah scribbled furiously in his notebook, recording the time, the make of the SUV, and what little he could see of the driver. Male, dark glasses, baseball cap. It wasn't much, but it was something. Another piece of the puzzle. Later that week, Noah followed Charles to a downtown restaurant and watched through the window as he met with Chief Bennett from the local police. They spoke in hushed tones over expensive steaks, and though Noah couldn't hear what they were saying, the friendly clap on the shoulder that Charles gave the chief before they parted ways sent a chill down his spine. "What exactly are you doing, kid?" Noah nearly jumped out of his skin at the voice. He whirled around to find a teenage girl standing behind him, arms crossed over her faded band t-shirt. She had wild, curly hair dyed blue at the tips and dark, skeptical eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Nothing," Noah said quickly, shoving his notebook into his backpack. "Just walking." "Yeah, right." The girl rolled her eyes. "You've been stalking that rich guy for like a week now. I've seen you skulking around his neighborhood. What's your deal?" Noah hesitated. Everyone he'd told so far had dismissed him. Why would this random teenager be any different? "I'm Cora," the girl said when Noah remained silent. "I'm stuck doing community service at the park across from Whitaker's house. Graffiti," she added with a hint of pride. "So I've had plenty of time to notice you being all secret agent behind the trees." "I'm Noah," he said finally. "And I saw him murder his daughter." He expected her to laugh, to roll her eyes again and walk away. Instead, Cora studied his face for a long moment. "Wow," she said finally. "That's intense and totally delusional." She shook her head. "Everyone knows about Maddie Whitaker. Sailing accident, right? Been all over the news." "That's a lie," Noah insisted, a familiar frustration rising in his chest. "I saw him push her wheelchair off Eagle Point Cliff, but no one believes me." Cora snorted. "Yeah, well, why would Charles Whitaker, who's basically this town's golden boy, push his kid off a cliff in broad daylight? That's not just murder, that's stupid murder." "I don't know why he did it," Noah admitted, "but I know what I saw." Cora seemed about to deliver another sarcastic comment when something caught her eye. She nudged Noah and nodded toward the restaurant. Charles was leaving, speaking intently on his phone. As he passed near them, they caught fragments of his conversation. "Needs to be taken care of. No one can find out. Too much at stake." Charles climbed into his car and drove away, but not before giving Cora and Noah a long, assessing look that made Noah's stomach knot with fear. "Okay," Cora said slowly once Charles was gone. "That was definitely sketchy." She turned to Noah. "Look, I still think you're probably full of it, but Whitaker is acting suspicious, and I'm bored out of my mind picking up trash in that park, so maybe we can help each other out." That night, after much planning and against Granny May's explicit warnings, Noah met Cora at the edge of the Whitaker property. The mansion was dark, except for a faint light in what must have been Charles's study. Security lights illuminated the grounds, but Cora seemed to know all the blind spots. "My brother works for a security company," she explained when Noah asked. "He's always complaining about rich people installing fancy systems then leaving obvious gaps." They crept across the manicured lawn toward a detached garage. Noah's heart was pounding so hard he was sure it would set off some kind of alarm, but they reached the building without incident. The garage was locked, but Cora produced a thin piece of metal from her pocket. "Please tell me you're not actually picking that lock," Noah whispered. "Relax," Cora muttered, working the tool into the keyhole. "My dad used to lock me out when he was drunk. Had to learn how to get back in somehow." After a minute of jiggling, there was a soft click. "Bingo!" They slipped inside, using their phone flashlights to navigate the space. The main bay held Charles's Mercedes and a sleek Jaguar, but it was what sat in the corner that made Noah freeze. Wheelchair. Not just any wheelchair, but one identical to the one Maddie had been in that day at the cliff. It was dusty and clearly hadn't been used in a while, but it was definitely a second wheelchair. Why would he need two wheelchairs if she supposedly drowned in a sailing accident? Noah whispered. Cora's skeptical expression had given way to genuine concern. Maybe he kept a spare? Or maybe, Noah said, he pushed one wheelchair off the cliff for show, knowing no one would find Maddie's body because she wasn't in it. Before Noah could continue, headlights swept across the garage windows as a car pulled up the driveway. "We need to go." "Now," Cora hissed, pulling Noah toward a side door. They slipped out just as they heard the main garage door begin to open. Next day, Noah and Cora went to the police station to report what they'd found. Officer Miller, a younger cop who seemed less dismissive than the others, took their statement but looked uncomfortable the entire time. "Look, kids," he said finally, "I appreciate your concern, but Charles Whitaker is a respected member of this community. These are serious accusations and you don't have any real evidence." "We saw a second wheelchair in his garage," Noah protested. "Having a spare wheelchair isn't a crime," Officer Miller said gently. "I'll look into it, but I wouldn't get your hopes up." As they left the station, Noah noticed a familiar black SUV parked across the street, the same one he'd seen Charles pass the envelope to. "They're not going to help us," Cora said, kicking a stone across the sidewalk. My brother always says the police in this town are bought and paid for. Noah wasn't surprised when later that evening he saw Officer Miller's patrol car pull up to the Whitaker mansion. The officer went inside and emerged 20 minutes later, looking grim. The next day at school, Noah was called to the principal's office. Mr. Lawson, who had always been friendly before, now regarded Noah with a mixture of pity and sternness. "Noah," he said, folding his hands on his desk, "I'm concerned about some behavior that's been reported. Several teachers have noticed you seem preoccupied, and there have been disturbing themes in your drawings." Noah's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? You've been drawing scenes of accidents, violence, and now I hear you've been spreading stories about Mr. Whitaker, who, I might add, just donated the funds for our new library wing." "They're not stories," Noah insisted. "I saw—" "You're suspended for 3 days," Mr. Lawson interrupted. "We've called your parents and they agree you need some time to reset. When you return, I expect this obsession with the Whitaker tragedy to be behind you." That evening, as Granny May helped Noah organize his room, a task his mother insisted would help him focus on positive things, she paused while folding his clothes, a distant look in her eyes. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to work for Maddie's mother." Noah's head snapped up. "What? You never told me that." Granny May sat heavily on the edge of Noah's bed. "It was years ago, before my stroke. I was a housekeeper at the Whitaker mansion when Mrs. Whitaker was still alive. Clara was her name. Beautiful woman, but sad. Always sad." "What was she like?" Noah asked eagerly. This was the first new information he'd had in weeks. "Gentle, kind to the staff, which is more than I can say for him." Granny May's face hardened. "Charles treated her like a possession, not a wife. I'd hear them arguing late at night. Once I saw her with bruises she tried to cover with makeup." "You think he hurt her?" Noah whispered. "I know he did," Granny May said firmly. "And not just physically. He controlled everything, who she saw, where she went, even what she ate. When little Madison was born, Clara was desperate to protect her from his influence. But then Clara died, and that poor child was left alone with him." "How did Mrs. Whitaker die?" Noah asked. "An accident," they said. "She fell down the stairs at their vacation home. No witnesses." Granny May's eyes met Noah's meaningfully. "I left their employment soon after. Couldn't stand to be in that house anymore. But I've always wondered." With Noah suspended from school, Cora took it upon herself to continue their investigation. She had a study hall period that coincided with the librarian's lunch break, giving her access to the school's archival room where old newspapers were kept. 2 days later, Cora showed up at Noah's house with a stack of photocopies. "You need to see these," she said, spreading them across Noah's bedroom floor. "I found articles about Clara Whitaker's death 7 years ago. It says she died from injuries sustained in a household accident, but there was never an autopsy report filed." "How is that possible?" Noah asked, scanning the article. "It gets weirder," Cora continued, pulling out another sheet. "The medical examiner who signed off on her death certificate retired suddenly 2 weeks later and moved to Florida. And get this, the vacation home where she died was sold within a month and demolished." "He covered it up," Noah whispered, "just like he's doing with Maddie." The next day, while following Charles again, Noah witnessed something that made his blood run cold. Charles was meeting with a woman in an expensive suit at an outdoor cafe, a lawyer, based on the briefcase and the legal papers spread between them. Noah positioned himself at a nearby table, pretending to be sketching while straining to hear their conversation. "This is becoming a problem, Charles," the woman was saying, her voice low but intense. "First the missing persons case, now these rumors." "I don't pay you to lecture me, Margaret," Charles snapped. "I pay you to fix things. Even I can't fix." "A murder investigation if it comes to that," the lawyer hissed. Charles's face darkened with anger. She was mine to control. Now everything's at risk. As the conversation continued, Noah tried to capture key phrases in his notebook. He was so focused that he didn't notice Charles watching him until the man abruptly stood up. Take care of the papers, Charles told the lawyer before walking directly toward Noah, who frantically gathered his things to flee. But Charles simply passed by him, pausing only long enough to say in a voice only Noah could hear, "Talented artist." But curious children often find themselves in dangerous situations. The threat was unmistakable. That night, Noah told Cora about the encounter, expecting her usual sarcastic quips about his recklessness. Instead, she was unusually quiet. "My dad left when I was 7, she said finally, sitting cross-legged on Noah's floor. "Just packed up and disappeared. My mom says he was a loser who couldn't handle responsibility, but..." She hesitated. "I always wonder if something else happened. If maybe he didn't leave voluntarily." "I'm sorry about your dad," Noah said. "Whatever, ancient history," Cora brushed it off. "The point is, I believe you now, about what you saw, and I'm going to help you prove it." The next day at school, Noah found his confiscated sketchbook in his locker. He hadn't seen it since his suspension began. Relieved to have it back, he flipped through the pages but stopped cold at an addition he hadn't made. There, between his bird studies and cliff sketches, was a new page. The drawing was rough and childlike, nothing like Noah's skilled renderings. It showed a girl in what appeared to be a tunnel, a wheelchair beside her rather than under her, and 3 simple words written in shaky handwriting: "I'm not dead." Mysterious drawing with the words "I'm not dead" changed everything. Noah and Cora stared at it for nearly an hour, analyzing every crude line and shaky letter. "It could be a fake," Cora said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Someone playing a sick joke." Noah shook his head. "Who would know enough to do that? And why put it in my sketchbook?" He traced the outline of the tunnel in the drawing. "What if she's telling us where she is?" The following Saturday, Noah and Cora returned to Eagle Point Cliff. The weather had turned cooler, a light fog drifting in from the ocean and wrapping the cliffs in a ghostly embrace. They moved cautiously down the same treacherous path Noah had used before, toward the beach at the cliff's base. "I don't see any tunnel," Cora muttered, scanning the rocky shore. The tide was low, exposing stretches of wet sand and tidal pools. "It has to be here somewhere," Noah insisted. "Why else would she draw it?" They searched for nearly 2 hours, climbing over slippery rocks and poking through dense brush. Just as Cora was suggesting they head back before the tide changed, Noah spotted something. "Look!" He pointed to a dark opening partially obscured by overgrown vegetation. "That wasn't visible last time I was here. The tide must have been higher. It was an old drainage tunnel, its concrete entrance weathered and discolored. Rusty metal reinforcements jutted out at odd angles, and the opening was just large enough for a person to enter if they crouched." "You're not seriously thinking of going in there?" Cora asked, eyeing the tunnel skeptically. "That thing looks ready to collapse." Noah was already pulling out his flashlight. "If Maddie's in there, or was in there, we need to know." The tunnel was damp and smelled of salt water and decay. They moved slowly, the beam of Noah's flashlight illuminating years of debris washed in by high tides, driftwood, plastic bottles, even a waterlogged shoe. "This place is disgusting," Cora whispered, her voice echoing slightly. "And probably full of diseases." Noah didn't respond. His light had caught something metallic glinting among the debris. He crouched down and carefully extracted it, a broken metal spoke, the kind used in wheelchair wheels. "Cora," he whispered, holding it up. "Look." A few feet further, wedged between some rocks, they found a folded piece of paper sealed inside, a plastic sandwich bag. Noah's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a childlike drawing similar to the one that had appeared in his sketchbook. A girl with blonde hair, a son, and what looked like a small cabin. At the bottom, in the same shaky handwriting, were the words, "He thinks I'm dead. Don't tell." "She's alive," Noah breathed, his voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Maddie's alive." "But where is she?" Cora asked, taking the drawing from Noah. "This looks like a cabin or something, not a tunnel." They continued deeper into the tunnel, which eventually opened up into a larger chamber, that appeared to be an old storm drain junction. Water dripped from the ceiling, and multiple smaller tunnels branched off in different directions. On one wall, scratched into the concrete, was a crude arrow pointing toward one of the tunnels, and what might have been the letter E. E for exit, Cora suggested. Or maybe a name? They followed the tunnel with the arrow for nearly 15 minutes before it gradually sloped upward and finally emerged in a densely wooded area, about half a mile from the cliff. The exit was well hidden by brush and would be easy to miss unless someone knew it was there. She could have crawled through here, Noah said, if she survived the fall and wasn't too badly hurt. And then what? Cora asked. Where would a kid in a wheelchair go? How would she survive? The answer came 3 days later, when Cora called Noah in a state of barely contained excitement. I found something, she said, her voice hushed even over the phone. My brother mentioned an old employee of Whitaker's who got fired years ago. Some kind of maintenance guy who lives off the grid now. His name is Elias. E for Elias, Noah whispered. Exactly. And get this, he lives in a cabin in the woods not far from where that tunnel exits. Finding Elias proved difficult. The man clearly didn't want to be found. After 2 failed attempts, they finally located his cabin. A small, sturdy structure partially hidden by trees, with solar panels on the roof and a well-tended vegetable garden. Smoke curled from the chimney despite the mild weather. What if he's dangerous? Cora whispered as they approached. What if he's in on it with Charles? Noah didn't get a chance to respond. The cabin door swung open, and a tall, lean man with a salt and pepper beard aimed a shotgun directly at them. That's far enough, he said, his voice gruff but not threatening. State your business. Noah stepped forward, hands raised. We're looking for Maddie Whitaker. The man's expression didn't change, but his grip on the shotgun tightened. Don't know any, Maddie. You kids are trespassing. Turn around and go home. Please, Noah said. I saw what her father did. I saw him push her off the cliff. I know she's alive, and I think you might be helping her. For a long moment, the man just stared at them, his weathered face unreadable. Then, from inside the cabin, came a small voice. It's okay, Elias. That's him. That's the boy who was drawing birds. The shotgun lowered slightly as a girl appeared, in the doorway behind Elias. She was thin and pale, with honey blonde hair that hung loose around her shoulders. Most shocking of all, she was standing on her own 2 feet, one hand braced against the doorframe for support. Maddie, Noah breathed. She offered a tentative smile. You found me. Inside the cabin over cups of herbal tea that Elias insisted would settle their nerves, Maddie told her story. Her voice was soft but steady, her hands occasionally trembling, as she recounted that day at the cliff. He was smiling, she said, her eyes distant with the memory. Right before he pushed me, he smiled and said it was for the best. She looked down at her hands. I thought I was going to die. I wanted to die for a moment. But you didn't fall all the way, Noah prompted gently. Maddie shook her head. The wheelchair tipped at the edge. I was thrown out. I hit some rocks and bushes on the way down, but I landed on a ledge about halfway down the cliff. The wheelchair kept going. She rubbed her arm, which bore a long, healing scar. I was bleeding a lot. I thought I was in hell when I woke up. Elias cleared his throat. I was collecting driftwood below the cliffs. Heard the commotion. Saw something fall. Went to investigate and found her on that ledge, barely conscious. Brought her here. Why not take her to a hospital? Cora asked. Elias's face hardened. Charles Whitaker owns half this town, including the hospital board. I worked for him for 15 years before he fired me for asking too many questions about his wife's death. I knew if I took Maddie in, she'd end up right back with him or worse. He was drugging me, Maddie said suddenly. Dad, every day these pills I was supposed to take for my condition. She made air quotes with her fingers. But Elias stopped giving them to me. And then, look. She stood up and took a few shaky steps across the room, without support. Her movements were unsteady but determined. The doctor said I'd never walk again after my accident 3 years ago, she explained. But Elias thinks maybe I could've, if Dad hadn't kept me medicated and convinced me I couldn't. Medical abuse, Cora whispered. He was keeping you sick on purpose. Maddie nodded. I think he liked having a helpless daughter. Someone completely dependent on him. When Mom was alive, she started asking questions about my treatment. That's when they started fighting more. Charles is looking for her, Elias warned. He's got people in the woods sometimes, hunting, and not for deer. He fixed Noah and Cora with a serious look. Now that you know, you're in danger too. Charles doesn't make mistakes. If she's alive, it means he's failed, and failures don't stay secret for long. The following week, Cora approached Charles Whitaker outside the town's most expensive restaurant. Noah watched nervously from across the street as she purposefully bumped into him, spilling her soda on his expensive suit. Watch where you're going, Charles snapped, dabbing at the stain with a handkerchief. So sorry, Mr. Whitaker, Cora said loudly, drawing attention from passers-by. By the way, I was wondering, why wasn't Maddie's old wheelchair included in the police report about her sailing accident? Charles froze, his expression shifting from annoyance to something cold and calculating. What did you say? Her spare wheelchair, Cora continued innocently. The one in your garage. Seems like an important detail for the investigation. Charles smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Children ask too many questions these days. He leaned closer to Cora. Be careful. Young lady, curiosity isn't always rewarded. That evening, Granny May gave Noah a yellowed envelope she'd kept hidden in an old photo album. I should have shown you this sooner, she said, her hands trembling slightly. But I was afraid. Clara gave this to me a week before she died. Made me promise not to open it unless something happened to her. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A letter written in elegant handwriting. To whoever is reading this, if you have this letter, then something has happened to me. I fear for my life and for my daughter's future. Charles is not the man the world believes him to be. He is controlling, manipulative, and I believe dangerous. The accident that confined Maddie to a wheelchair was no accident at all. If anything happens to me, please protect Maddie. She is in danger as long as she remains under his control. Clara Whitaker. Noah folded the letter carefully. This is proof. We could take this to the police. Granny May shook her head sadly. Police Chief Bennett was best man at Charles's wedding. They've been friends since college. You need more than a letter from a dead woman. The next day, Elias showed them something he'd kept hidden, an old cassette recorder with a tape still inside. I used to do maintenance at the house, he explained. Found this tape recorder behind a vent I was fixing in Maddie's room. Charles must have forgotten. It was there. He pressed play and Charles Whitaker's voice filled the small cabin. Stop crying. You're useless like this. Do you understand me, Maddie? Useless. If you tell anyone about our night drives or your medications, you'll regret it. Remember what happened to your mother? Accidents happen, Maddie. They happen all the time. Maddie's face had gone pale, but her jaw was set in determination. I need to testify against him. I need to tell people what he did. To me and to Mom. Before they could formulate a plan, there was a knock at the cabin door. Everyone froze. Elias reached for his shotgun, but Maddie placed a hand on his arm. It's okay, she said. I called him. The door opened to reveal a young man in his early 20s with curly hair similar to Cora's. Isaac? Cora gasped. What are you doing here? Your brother is studying law, Maddie explained. I remembered you mentioning it. We need legal help. Isaac looked around the cabin, taking in the situation with increasingly wide eyes. Cora, what have you gotten yourself into? Before she could answer, Elias jerked his head toward the window. Outside, through the trees, a hooded figure was photographing the cabin. He quickly ducked out of sight. They found us, Elias said grimly. Charles knows. The next morning, thick smoke filled the cabin as Elias shook Noah and Cora awake. Fire, he shouted. They've set the woods ablaze. Through the windows, orange flames licked at the surrounding trees, a wall of fire approaching from 3 sides. The only clear path was toward the creek that ran behind the property. Grab only what's essential, Elias commanded, helping Maddie to her feet. We have minutes, not hours. Noah stuffed the letter from Clara and his sketchbook into his backpack. Cora grabbed the cassette tape. Maddie hesitated by a small desk, her hand hovering over a leather-bound journal. My diary, she whispered. Mom gave it to me. No time, Elias said, pulling her toward the door. It's just things, Maddie. We need to save ourselves. They fled through the woods, Elias carrying Maddie on his back when her legs grew too tired. The creek provided a natural barrier against the fire, and they followed it downstream for nearly a mile before stopping to catch their breath. They burned everything, Maddie said, tears streaming down her face. All I had left of Mom was in that journal. They're trying to destroy evidence, Isaac said grimly, and scare us off. He turned to Cora. I'm calling my mentor, Frances Duval. She was disbarred for taking on the wrong powerful clients, but she still knows her way around the law. She can help us. Frances Duval turned out to be a steely-eyed woman in her 50s who asked sharp questions and took meticulous notes. When they finished explaining the situation, she sat back in her chair and tapped her pen against her notepad. You've got a compelling story, she said, but stories aren't evidence in court. We need something solid, documentation, witnesses, physical evidence that can't be disputed. We had evidence, Cora said bitterly, but Charles burned it all. Not all of it, Granny May said. They had reconvened at Noah's house where Maddie was reunited with the elderly woman who had once helped care for her. Granny May reached for the necklace she always wore, a small silver pendant that hung from a thin chain. With trembling fingers, she twisted it open, revealing a tiny USB drive hidden inside. Clara gave me this along with the letter. She explained, told me to keep it safe and close to my heart always. On the drive were audio recordings, Clara Whitaker's voice documenting her suspicions about Charles, conversations about offshore bank accounts, and her plans to leave him and take Maddie away. The final recording cut off abruptly mid-sentence. This is it, Frances said, her eyes gleaming. This is what we need. Electronic evidence with timestamps that predate her death. But their victory was short-lived. The next day, using his influence as a major donor and business leader, Charles convinced the mayor to declare a public safety emergency in response to the forest fire. Roads were blocked, police increased patrols, and news stations ran stories about dangerous arsonists still at large. He's shutting down the town, Isaac said, making it impossible for us to move or communicate. While searching through the charred remains of Elias's cabin for anything salvageable, Cora made a discovery. Under a fallen support beam, protected by a metal toolbox that had partially melted over it, was a small fireproof safe. Inside was Maddie's burner phone, a prepaid cell phone Elias had given her for emergencies. The phone contained text messages between Maddie and someone saved as SM, messages that dated back months before Charles pushed her off the cliff. SM, are you safe? Has he increased your medication again? Maddie, yes. Can barely stay awake now. Please help. SM, I'm trying to gather evidence. Stay strong. I'll come for you soon. Maddie, he found the papers. Says we're going for a drive tomorrow. SM, don't go, make an excuse, I'm almost ready. Maddie, too late. Love you. SM, Noah read aloud. Who's SM? Maddie's voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah Morgan, my stepmother. Dad told everyone she abandoned us and moved to Europe, but she was trying to help me. Another woman Charles made disappear, Granny May said grimly. While Maddie recovered at Granny May's house, she began physical therapy of her own design. Simple exercises to strengthen her legs, short walks that grew longer each day, balance practice using a broomstick as support. Noah often sat with her, sketching as she worked, documenting her progress in detailed drawings. I want to stand in front of him in court someday, Maddie said during one of these sessions. I want to look him in the eye while I testify on my own 2 feet. I want him to know he failed to break me. Charles's grip on the town tightened. Police officers questioned Elias about his suspicious activities. Isaac was pulled over 3 times in one day for routine traffic checks. Local news ran a special segment on Charles Whitaker, highlighting his charitable contributions and his strength through tragedy. "We need to break his control," Francis said during a strategy meeting. "Right now, he's controlling the narrative. We need to change that." "I have an idea," Cora said slowly. "But it's risky. Really risky." The plan was simple but dangerous. They would set a trap. Maddie would pretend to turn herself in, claiming she had run away and now wanted to come home. She would wear a hidden microphone provided by Francis, hoping to get Charles to incriminate himself. "It's too dangerous," Noah protested. "What if he hurts her again?" "I need to do this," Maddie insisted. "It's the only way to end this." The meeting was arranged. A public reconciliation at the town park, with media invited to document the touching reunion of father and daughter. Charles arrived looking appropriately emotional, arms outstretched to embrace his lost child. But something was wrong. There were too many police officers present, all positioned strategically around the perimeter, and Charles's smile held an edge of triumph that made Noah's blood run cold. "Maddie," Charles said, his voice breaking perfectly on cue. "My sweet girl, you had us all so worried." Maddie began her rehearsed speech, but Charles interrupted, putting an arm around her shoulders, and turning to the assembled reporters. "My daughter has been through a terrible ordeal," he announced. "She was kidnapped by a disturbed maintenance worker who filled her head with delusions. She'll need extensive psychiatric care to recover from this trauma." Before anyone could react, police officers moved in, separating Maddie from Noah, Cora, and the others. A doctor approached with a prepared syringe. "For her own safety," Charles explained smoothly as Maddie was sedated. "She's been having episodes, hallucinations about me harming her. A side effect of her condition, I'm afraid." "No!" Noah shouted, lunging forward only to be held back by an officer. "He's lying! He pushed her off the cliff! Tell them, Maddie!" But Maddie's eyes were already growing unfocused as the sedative took effect. Through tears, Noah watched helplessly as she was loaded into an ambulance. "She'll receive the best care at Lakeside Psychiatric Facility," Charles told the reporters, his face a mask of concern. "I only want what's best for my daughter." Later, that night, Noah sat on his bed, staring at Maddie's drawing of the cliff in his sketchbook. The trap had backfired completely. Charles had outmaneuvered them, turning their plan against them and taking Maddie back. Now she was locked away, probably being drugged again, with no way to reach her. "We're not done yet," Noah whispered to the empty room, his fingers tracing the outline of Maddie's childlike drawing. "I promise, we're not done yet." 3 days had passed since Maddie was taken to Lakeside Psychiatric Facility. 3 days of unanswered phone calls, blocked visits, and mounting despair. Noah had barely left his room, lying on his bed and staring at the ceiling, consumed by guilt and failure. "We never should have tried that stupid plan," he murmured to himself for the 100th time. We walked her right into his hands. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His mother opened the door, her face lined with worry. "Noah, honey, Cora's here to see you." "Again." "Tell her I'm sick," Noah mumbled, rolling away to face the wall. His mother sighed. "She says it's important. Something about a final drawing." Noah sat up so quickly he felt dizzy. "Send her up." Cora burst into his room moments later, clutching his sketchbook. "Look at this," she said, flipping to the last page. "I found it when I was going through your stuff while waiting. It wasn't here before." A new drawing had appeared in Noah's sketchbook, similar to the previous ones, but this time showing a crude sketch of a boy holding what looked like a key. Written beneath it in that same shaky handwriting, "Don't give up." "How did this get here?" Noah asked, examining the page. "It has to be Granny May," Cora said. "She must have snuck it in. The question is, how did she get it from Maddie?" They found Granny May in her rocking chair, knitting calmly as if she didn't have a care in the world. "Granny," Noah said, holding up the sketchbook. "Did you put this drawing in here?" The old woman continued knitting for a moment before looking up with a small smile. "A nice nurse from Lakeside comes to check on my heart condition every Tuesday. Maddie found a way to slip her the drawing. Maddie's communicating with us?" Noah couldn't keep the hope from his voice. Granny May nodded. The nurse says they've got her drugged up pretty bad, but she's fighting it. She wanted you to know she hasn't given up. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. And neither should we. Meanwhile, at Lakeside Psychiatric Facility, Maddie drifted in and out of consciousness. The white room spun around her, time blending together in a haze of medications and therapy sessions with doctors who seemed more interested in documenting her delusions than helping her. "Tell me again about these fantasies regarding your father," Dr. Lewis said, his pen poised above his notepad. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who never quite looked Maddie in the eye. "Not fantasies," Maddie slurred, fighting against the sedatives. "Happened. Pushed me. Off cliff." Dr. Lewis hummed, writing something down. "And you believe your father has been medicating you unnecessarily? That you can actually walk?" Maddie tried to sit up straighter, focusing all her concentration. "Yes, I can show you." "That won't be necessary," Dr. Lewis said quickly. "Your father has provided your complete medical history. Your spinal injury is well documented. These beliefs about walking are part of your break from reality." "No," Maddie whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Real. All real." After the doctor left, Maddie forced herself to stay awake despite the drugs making her eyelids heavy. She needed to remember who she was, what had happened. She repeated the facts to herself like a mantra. "My name is Madison Whitaker. My father pushed me off a cliff. He killed my mother. I can walk. Noah saw everything. Don't forget. Don't forget." Cora and Isaac devised a plan to investigate the facility. Dressed in professional clothes borrowed from their mother's closet, they arrived at Lakeside with clipboards and confident smiles. "We're from Valley Community College," Cora explained to the receptionist. "Our legal ethics professor sent us to deliver these updated compliance documents for Dr. Harmon." The ruse worked long enough for them to access a records room, where Isaac quickly searched through files while Cora kept watch. "Look at this," Isaac whispered, holding up a folder labeled Whitaker M. "Her admission paperwork and preliminary psych evaluation are dated 2 weeks before she was even brought in." They were planning to commit her all along, Cora realized. The whole public reunion was just theater. "And this," Isaac continued, flipping through the file. "Her symptoms and hallucinations are all documented in detail, but they're backdated to before she disappeared. Charles has been building a paper trail to discredit her for months. Frances Duval had been making inquiries of her own. Through old legal contacts, she located a former nurse who had quit Lakeside 6 months earlier. That place isn't a hospital. It's a prison, the nurse Vanessa Baker told them when they met at a diner 20 miles outside town. Rich families send their problem children there to disappear. Once you're admitted, it's nearly impossible to get out without the family's consent. "Have you ever treated patients who weren't actually ill?" Frances asked carefully. Vanessa stirred her coffee, not meeting their eyes. "More than I care to admit. There was one girl. Father claimed she was bipolar, dangerous, but I never saw any symptoms when she wasn't medicated. The day I suggested reducing her dosage, I was removed from her case." She looked up, her expression haunted. 2 weeks later, they announced she'd died of complications. I quit the next day. While Noah and the others worked to build their case, Granny May decided to take matters into her own hands. She contacted Janet Wilson, a journalist from the Psy, local newspaper who had once written an expose on nursing home abuses. "I have information about Charles Whitaker," Granny May told her when they met at the senior center's weekly bingo game. "About his daughter, his wife's death, and the cover-ups." "Mrs. Henderson," Janet said carefully, "those are serious accusations. Charles Whitaker owns the company that publishes our paper." "I know the risks," Granny May replied, sliding over a flash drive, "but the truth needs to come out. That man pushed his daughter off a cliff and is now drugging her in a psychiatric facility to keep her quiet." Janet hesitated, fingers hovering over the flash drive. "I could lose my job, and a child could lose her life," Granny May countered, "just like her mother did." 2 days later, Charles Whitaker called a press conference on the steps of City Hall. Dressed impeccably as always, he spoke with practiced emotion about his daughter's tragic mental health situation. Madison has been suffering from paranoid delusions, a side effect of her spinal injury and medications, he explained to the assembled reporters. These delusions include elaborate conspiracy theories about me and others wishing to harm her. He paused, dabbing at his eye with a handkerchief. As a father, it breaks my heart to see my child suffer this way. I ask the community to be wary of any wild conspiracies being spread about our family. Madison needs healing, not exploitation. Noah watched the press conference on TV, his fists clenched in frustration. He's doing it again. Controlling the story, making everyone doubt her, just like he's been doing to Maddie for years. Meanwhile, Elias had gone deep underground after narrowly escaping another attempt to capture him when police raided his new hideout. He reached out to an old friend, a woman named Dorothy Dottie Simmons, a former IT specialist who now lived off the grid after exposing corporate corruption. I need your help, Elias told her. We have evidence against a powerful man, but no way to make it public without him shutting it down. Dottie, a middle-aged woman with faded purple hair and multiple computer screens in her trailer, listened to the whole story without interruption. Controlled media, bought police, psychiatric imprisonment, she summarized. Classic powerful person playbook, but the internet is still pretty hard to control completely. She cracked her knuckles. Give me what you've got, and I'll help you build a digital dead man switch. If anything happens to any of you, everything goes public at once. That night, Noah snuck out of his house and broke into the school. Using a window, he knew the janitor. Always left unlocked, he made his way to the administrative office. He needed to find evidence of Charles's corruption at the school level, something to explain why the principal had been so quick to suspend him. In a filing cabinet marked Board of Trustees, Noah discovered what he was looking for: financial. Records showing Charles had made massive donations to the school over the years, each coinciding with a potential scandal being buried. A teacher who suddenly resigned after reporting concerns about Maddie. Sports equipment funding that appeared just after Charles's drunk driving incident was kept out of the school paper. Most damning of all was a check for $50,000 to a medical examiner dated 1 week after Clara Whitaker's death, with consultation services written in the memo line. Bribery, Noah whispered, taking photos with his phone. He bribed the medical examiner after killing Maddie's mom. At Lakeside, Maddie was developing her own plan. The medications made it difficult to think clearly, but she forced herself to stay focused during the brief periods when the drugs began to wear off. She had noticed one nurse, a young woman named Amber, who seemed less hardened than the others, who sometimes looked at her with something close to sympathy. During an evening medication check, Maddie deliberately began to convulse, her body shaking violently on the bed. "Help!" she gasped between spasms. "Can't breathe!" Amber rushed to her side, calling for the doctor. In the chaos, Maddie managed to grab the nurse's phone from her pocket. While medical staff checked her vitals, she clutched the phone beneath her blanket. Later, alone in her room with the lights dimmed for the night, Maddie sent a single text to Noah's number, which she had memorized during her time with Elias. Silver Room, 2nd floor. Tomorrow, the team gathered at Francis's apartment to plan their most dangerous mission yet, extracting Maddie from Lakeside. "We'll need distractions at multiple points," Isaac said, sketching a rough layout of the facility based on what they'd observed during their previous visit. "Security is heaviest at the main entrance in the east wing where the high-risk patients are kept. I can cause an electrical issue," Elias suggested, "temporarily disable their security systems, but it won't give you much time." "I can disguise myself as delivery personnel," Noah volunteered, small enough to not seem threatening, old enough to be a high school kid with a part-time job. "And I'll create a distraction at the front desk," Cora added. "Drama club has to be good for something, right?" As they finalized their plan, Francis looked around at the determined faces of the unlikely team: a disbarred lawyer, an off-grid maintenance man, a teenage graffiti artist, a law student, and a 10-year-old boy, all risking everything to save one girl from a man who seemed untouchable. "Charles Whitaker has no idea what's coming for him," she said softly. The morning of the rescue operation dawned clear and crisp. Noah barely slept the night before, his mind racing with all the ways their plan could fail. But when Dottie arrived with the disguises and equipment, a strange calm settled over him. They were really doing this. They were going to save Maddie. "Remember," Francis told them during the final briefing, "if you're caught, you say nothing, except I want a lawyer. No explanations, no justifications, just those 5 words." Noah nodded, slipping on the blue uniform Dottie had procured, a convincing replica of the local courier services outfit, complete with a cap pulled low over his eyes. The ID badge hanging around his neck identified him as Jake Miller, a Popeye, 16-year-old part-timer. Dottie had aged him up in the photo with subtle makeup and lighting. "You look like a completely different person," Cora said, herself transformed with a blonde wig and glasses to play the role of an administrative intern. At exactly 2:15 p.m., the operation began. Isaac created a minor traffic incident near the facility's main road, diverting attention and resources. Minutes later, Elias activated a device Dottie had rigged, causing a brief power fluctuation in the facility's electrical system. With security distracted, Cora entered through the main entrance, arms full of files. "Delivery for Dr. Lewis," she announced to the receptionist. "Annual compliance reports. Need signatures on all of these immediately." As the flustered receptionist began sorting through the paperwork, Noah slipped in through a service entrance, pushing a dolly loaded with boxes. With staff focused on the power issues and Cora's administrative chaos, he made his way to the second floor using the service elevator. The silver room turned out to be a reference to the door, uniquely painted silver instead of the standard white of the other rooms. Noah approached cautiously, checking for staff. The corridor was empty, most personnel responding to the multiple distractions. Using a keycard Dottie had programmed, Noah swiped the lock. It flashed red. He tried again, his heart hammering. Red, again. On the third try, just as panic began to set in, the light turned green. Maddie was lying on a narrow bed, her eyes half closed, an IV in her arm. She looked smaller somehow, paler, her honey blonde hair limp around her face. For a terrifying moment, Noah thought they were too late. Then her eyes focused on him, and a faint smile touched her lips. "You came," she whispered. "Always." Noah replied, moving quickly to her side. "Can you walk?" Maddie struggled to sit up. "Not well. They've been keeping me drugged." Noah removed the IV with care, using the technique Dottie had shown him. He helped Maddie to her feet, supporting her weight, as her legs threatened to buckle. "My wheelchair," she murmured, nodding toward the corner. "It's chained to the wall." Noah examined the chain securing the wheelchair. It was heavy-duty, with a padlock that would take too long to pick. Thinking quickly, he grabbed a decorative paperweight from the nightstand and used it to wedge the wall door open. "We'll have to go without it," he decided. "I'll help you." In the hallway, an alarm suddenly blared. Not part of their plan. Somewhere, something had gone wrong. "Attention all staff," a voice announced over the intercom. "Security breach in progress. Initiate lockdown procedures." "We need to hurry," Noah urged, half carrying Maddie toward the service elevator. But when they arrived, the elevator was disabled, emergency protocols in effect. "The stairs," Maddie suggested, pointing to a door marked emergency exit. They had barely made it down one flight when a security guard appeared below them. Noah froze, Maddie's arms still around his shoulders, trapped on the landing. Just then, the power went out completely. Elias had cut the main line, plunging the stairwell into darkness except for the dim glow of emergency lights. In the confusion, Noah and Maddie slipped past the disoriented guard, continuing downward. By the time they reached the ground floor, sweat was pouring down Noah's face from the effort of supporting Maddie's weight. "Almost there," he encouraged her as they approached a service door Elias had identified as their extraction point. "Elias is waiting on the other side." But when they pushed through the door, it wasn't Elias waiting for them. It was a black SUV with tinted windows, its engine running. Noah's blood ran cold. "Run!" he whispered to Maddie, trying to pull her back inside. Too late. The SUV's door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. "Going somewhere?" Charles Whitaker asked, his voice unnervingly calm. Before they could retreat, two men emerged. From behind them, blocking their return to the building. Noah recognized one as the driver who had received the manila envelope weeks ago. "My daughter needs her medication," Charles said smoothly, approaching them. "And you, Noah Wilson, need to learn about boundaries." He turned to his men. "Take them both. The boy, too." Suddenly, headlights flooded the area as another vehicle roared into the parking lot. Elias's truck, with Cora in the passenger seat. The truck screeched to a halt between Charles and the children. Elias jumped out, shotgun in hand. "Back away." From them, Whitaker. Charles didn't even flinch. The loyal handyman still fighting battles you can't win. He reached inside his jacket. Elias raised the shotgun. "Don't." Everything happened at once. Charles withdrew not a weapon but a phone, pressing a button. Sirens wailed in the distance, rapidly approaching. One of Charles's men lunged at Elias, who fired a warning shot into the air. In the chaos, Noah pulled Maddie toward the truck. "Get in!" Cora shouted, throwing open the rear door. They scrambled inside as Elias backed toward the vehicle, keeping his shotgun trained on Charles, who stood watching with an eerie calm. "Let them run," Charles said to his men, who had started to pursue. "They'll lead me right to what I need." As they sped away, Maddie collapsed against Noah, exhaustion and relief overwhelming her. "He let us go," she whispered. "Why would he let us go?" "He's playing with us," Elias growled, eyes fixed on the road as police cars streaked past them in the opposite direction. Like a cat with mice, they drove for hours, taking back roads and switching vehicles twice. First to Dottie's van, then to an old pickup truck Isaac had borrowed from a friend. By nightfall, they reached their new hideout, an abandoned mining complex outside town, where tunnels honeycombed the hillside. "The mines have been closed for decades," Dottie explained as she led them through a hidden entrance reinforced with modern supports. "I've been prepping this place as a fallback for years. Multiple exits, natural ventilation, and completely off any grid." Inside, the main chamber had been converted into a surprisingly comfortable living space, with solar-powered lights, cots, food supplies, and even a small bathroom with running water pumped from an underground spring. Francis and Isaac were already there, having taken different routes to avoid being followed. Granny May had been relocated to the home of Janet Wilson, the journalist, for safety. "Charles will be looking for us," Francis warned. "He'll have the police, private security, maybe even state authorities if he can convince them we kidnapped Maddie." "Let him look," Dottie said confidently. "I've set up motion sensors and cameras covering every approach. If anyone comes within half a mile, we'll know." Without the heavy medications from Lakeside, Maddie began to improve rapidly. Color returned to her cheeks, and her mind cleared. Noah sat with her as she practiced standing, then taking small steps, recording her progress. In his sketchbook, "I never wanted to die," Maddie confessed one evening as they sat at the mouth of a tunnel, watching the sunset paint the distant hills. "Even when he pushed me, even when I was falling, I just didn't want to live in pain anymore." She looked at Noah, her eyes clear and determined. "But when I saw your face that day at the cliff, someone who saw the truth, who might believe me, that's when I decided to live, no matter what." Meanwhile, Janet Wilson, despite losing her job at the newspaper after her editor discovered her investigation, had taken the story online. Using Dottie's secure servers, she published a series of articles detailing Charles Whitaker's history of abuse, complete with the evidence the team had gathered. The story gained traction slowly at first, then exploded when a national news blog picked it up. Suddenly, people were asking questions, demanding answers. Charles's carefully constructed public image began to crack. In response, Charles arranged his own interview with a friendly local TV station. Looking appropriately distressed, he explained that his daughter had been kidnapped by a disturbed former employee with a grudge who had brainwashed her and potentially other children. "I just want my daughter back safe," he said, tears glistening in his eyes. "And I fear for the other children involved. They're in danger from these delusional adults who have convinced them of terrible falsehoods." The interview might have swayed public opinion back in his favor if not for what happened next. During the live broadcast, the station's feed was briefly hijacked. For 30 seconds, viewers instead saw Maddie, standing on her own, though unsteadily, holding up Clara's letter and speaking directly to the camera. "My name is Madison Whitaker. My father pushed me off a cliff because I discovered he killed my mother. I am not delusional. I am not sick. And I am not afraid of him anymore." The feed cut back to a flustered news anchor, but the damage was done. The clip went viral within hours. Charles's retaliation was swift and brutal. Using connections no one knew he had, he arranged for Noah's grandmother to be arrested on fabricated charges of endangering a minor. The message was clear: surrender. Maddie, or those they loved, would suffer. "He's raising the stakes," Francis warned during an emergency meeting. "And he won't stop with Granny May." "Then we don't stop either," Noah said firmly, surprising everyone with his conviction. "We've been running and hiding. It's time to face him directly." "What are you suggesting?" Cora asked. Noah looked around at their unlikely team, then at Maddie, who nodded in silent agreement. "We go back to where it all began," Noah said. "We return to the cliff." Granny May sat straight-backed in a cold metal chair, facing two men in dark suits who had been questioning her for hours. The small room in the county detention center smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Despite her exhaustion, Granny May's eyes remained defiant. "Let's try this again, Mrs. Henderson," said the taller man whose ID badge read Agent Wilson. "Where is Madison Whitaker currently located?" "I've told you already," Granny May replied. "I don't know where my grandson and his friends are. I'm an old woman with a heart condition. Do you think they'd tell me their secret hideout?" The second man leaned forward. "You're not being charged with kidnapping yet, but obstruction of justice is still a serious offense. Mr. Whitaker is very concerned about his daughter's safety." Granny May gave a dry laugh. "I'm sure he is. Concerned she might tell the truth. About him." "Mrs. Henderson," Agent Wilson sighed, "we have evidence that you've been in contact with the group harboring Maddie. Phone records show calls between you and Noah just days ago. My grandson calls to check on me. That's not a crime. It is when you're aiding fugitives." Outside the detention center, a small crowd had gathered. Janet Wilson's stories had stirred something in the community: doubt, questions, and for some, outrage at the treatment of an elderly woman. Among the protesters was Ms. Peterson, Noah's science teacher from the field trip. "I didn't believe him," she told a reporter who had shown up to cover the demonstration. "When Noah came running to tell us what he'd seen that day at the cliff, I dismissed him. We all did. Now I can't help wondering if we failed that boy when he needed adults to trust him." In the abandoned mine that served as their hideout, Francis and Isaac were preparing legal documents spread across a makeshift table. "We need to build an airtight case," Francis explained, sorting through papers. "Attempted murder, conspiracy, medical abuse, obstruction of justice, false imprisonment, the works. But it all hinges on Maddie's testimony. And getting a judge who isn't in Charles's pocket," Isaac added grimly. "That's why we're filing in federal court," Francis replied. "Outside Charles's sphere of influence, we've documented financial transfers to 3 local judges, the police chief, and half the town council. Charles may own this town, but his reach has limits." "What about Granny May?" Cora asked from where she sat with Noah, helping him organize his sketches and notes into a chronological record of events. "I've called in every favor I have left," Francis assured them. "Got an old colleague from my law firm days to represent her. They can't hold her long without formal charges, and the public attention makes it risky for Charles to push too hard." In another section of the mine, Maddie was working with Elias on her physical therapy. Her progress over the past week had been remarkable, from barely standing to now walking short distances without support. The drugs had finally cleared her system, and with them went the fog that had clouded her mind for years. "Again," Elias instructed, standing at the end of a path they'd marked out with rope. "Focus on keeping your weight centered. Maddie took a deep breath and began walking toward him, her steps wobbly but determined. Halfway across, she stumbled. Before Elias could move to help, she caught herself. "I've got this," she said, straightening. With renewed concentration, she completed the path. One more time. Noah watched from the entrance, a small smile on his face. The girl who'd been thrown away like garbage was reclaiming her strength one step at a time. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. That evening, around a small fire in the main chamber, Maddie made an announcement. "I want to record my testimony," she said firmly. "Everything, from the beginning. About Mom, about the medications, about the cliff, all of it. Are you sure?" Dottie asked. "Once it's out there, we can't take it back." Maddie nodded. "I'm done hiding. And if something happens to me—" "Don't say that," Noah interrupted. "We need to be realistic," Maddie continued gently. "My father doesn't give up, and he doesn't leave loose ends. This way, my story gets told no matter what." The recording session lasted hours. Maddie spoke clearly and methodically, detailing years of psychological manipulation and medical abuse. She described how Charles had gradually isolated her mother, Clara, controlling every aspect of their lives. She recalled the night she overheard them arguing about taking her to a different doctor and how her mother died 3 days later in a fall. "He started changing my medications after Mom died," Maddie explained, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "The new pills made me dizzy, weak. When I fell down the stairs, the doctors said I'd damaged my spine. But I always wondered if there was really anything wrong with me at all." When she described the day at the cliff, her voice finally broke. "He was smiling when he pushed me, like he was setting me free. But he wasn't freeing me. He was erasing a problem." The testimony, along with all their evidence, was uploaded to secure servers around the world. Dottie ensured that even if their computers were seized or destroyed, the truth would survive. The next morning, they woke to news that shook them all. Charles had given a televised statement announcing a $500,000 reward for information leading to Maddie's rescue from her captors. "He's putting a bounty on our heads," Elias growled, pacing the chamber. "Every opportunist and bounty hunter in the state will be looking for us now." But it was what happened next that truly stunned them. On live television, Charles's spokesperson, a polished PR professional who'd been managing his public image, resigned in the middle of a press conference. "I can no longer in good conscience represent Mr. Whitaker," she announced, her professional demeanor cracking. "I've seen evidence that suggests his daughter's claims may have merit, and I urge authorities to investigate fully." She walked off. Camera as reporters shouted questions. The tide was turning. Janet Wilson's articles had gone national. Social media was flooded with "Foxer Justice for Maddie" posts. Outside Charles's mansion, protesters gathered daily, their numbers growing. In response, Charles made a calculated appearance on a morning news show, his face a mask of paternal anguish. "My daughter is disturbed," he said, shaking his head sadly. "And the children helping her, they're in over their heads. I promise you, this ends soon." The threat wasn't subtle. At Noah's school, something unexpected was happening. The same classmates who had mocked him were now defending him. James, the bully who had tormented Noah on the field trip, approached Ms. Peterson after class. "I want to apologize to Noah," he mumbled, staring at his shoes. "I should have believed him." Ms. Peterson placed a hand on his shoulder. "We all should have. Sometimes it takes incredible courage to tell the truth, especially when no one wants to hear it." As public support grew, the team began formulating their most daring plan yet. After days of debate, they decided to return to Eagle Point Cliff, the scene of the original crime. "We'll recreate that day," Noah explained, drawing a rough map of the cliff area. "But this time, we'll have cameras, microphones, witnesses. We'll draw Charles out and get him to incriminate himself." "It's too dangerous," Francis argued. "He tried to kill Maddie once there already." "He won't be expecting me to walk," Maddie said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood in the entrance to the chamber, leaning slightly on a walking stick but otherwise supporting her own weight. "We use his expectations against him. He'll be looking for a scared girl in a wheelchair, not someone who can stand up to him. And this time, Noah added, he won't be facing a frightened 10-year-old hiding behind rocks. He'll be facing all of us. The plan was meticulous. Dottie set up hidden cameras throughout the cliff area. Elias scouted multiple escape routes. Francis prepared legal documents for immediate filing should they obtain a confession. They even reached out to a state police detective who Janet had verified wasn't connected to Charles. To draw Charles to the cliff, they released a single photograph. Online, Maddie in her wheelchair at the cliff's edge, the same spot where he had pushed her months ago. The message was clear. She was returning to where it began. The morning of the confrontation dawned clear and cool, much like the day Noah had first witnessed the crime. As the team took their positions, Noah found himself back in the same rocky outcropping where he'd been drawing birds that fateful day. History repeating itself, he murmured, looking out at the waves crashing against the cliff base below. Not this time, Cora replied from her hiding spot nearby. This time, we're ready for him. They didn't have to wait long. A black Mercedes pulled up to the cliff access road less than an hour after they arrived. Charles Whitaker stepped out, alone but visibly armed, the outline of a gun visible beneath his tailored jacket. Maddie sat in her wheelchair at the edge of the cliff path, exactly where she'd been that day. From a distance, she looked small and vulnerable. Charles approached slowly, his face unreadable. "Madison," he called, his voice carrying on the breeze. "This is quite dramatic even for you." "I thought you'd appreciate the symmetry, Dad," Maddie replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Charles stopped a few yards away, hands in his pockets. "You've caused quite a lot of trouble. Cost me millions in damage control. Is that all you care about? Money? Your reputation?" Charles sighed. "I care about order. Control. You were supposed to be part of that order, Madison. My perfect, fragile daughter who needed me, who gave me sympathy, respect." His expression hardened. "Instead, you've become a liability." "Like Mom was?" Maddie asked. Something dark flashed across Charles's face. "Your mother made similar mistakes, thinking she could take what was mine." "I was never yours," Maddie said. "Neither was she." Charles took a step closer. "Everything in my life is mine to control, to keep or discard as necessary." His hand moved toward his jacket. "You brought me to the place where I ended you. Poetic. But I don't make the same mistake twice." "Neither do I," Maddie said. And with that, she stood up. The shock that registered on Charles's face was everything they'd hoped for. He froze, momentarily bewildered as Maddie stepped away from the wheelchair, standing firmly on her own 2 feet. "Impossible," he whispered. "The damage was real. The doctors confirmed." "The doctors you paid?" Maddie asked. "The medications you forced me to take. Those weren't treating an injury, Dad. They were causing one." Charles's composure cracked. "You ungrateful little—" He lunged forward, reaching for Maddie. At that moment, Noah burst from his hiding place, and from all around the cliff, the others emerged. Cora, Isaac, Elias, Francis, and Dottie. Charles spun around, suddenly realizing he was surrounded. "It's over, Charles," Francis called. "Everything you've just said has been recorded and is being live-streamed right now. Step away from your daughter." Charles's hand moved to his gun, but before he could draw it, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police cars, state troopers, and even FBI agents flooded the area, responding to an anonymous tip about an armed man threatening a minor at the cliff. As officers approached with weapons drawn, Charles's face contorted with rage. "She's mine!" he screamed, lunging one last time for Maddie. But Maddie simply stepped aside, her months of physical therapy giving her a strength and balance Charles hadn't anticipated. He stumbled past her, momentarily off balance at the edge of the cliff, the same edge where he'd once pushed his daughter. For one terrible moment, Noah thought Charles might fall, might suffer the same fate he'd planned for Maddie. But Elias grabbed the back of Charles's jacket, yanking him away from the edge. "Not like this," Elias growled. "You face justice like a man." As the officers handcuffed Charles, reporters and camera crews arrived, alerted by Dottie's live stream. The entire arrest was captured for the world to see. Charles Whitaker screaming about betrayal, about how everything was his by right as he was led away. Maddie watched silently, tears streaming down her face. When Charles was finally gone, she turned to Noah and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me that day. Thank you for not looking away." The trial was dubbed the case of the century by breathless media outlets. For 3 weeks, the nation was captivated by the testimony against Charles Whitaker. Medical experts confirming Maddie's unnecessary treatments, financial records showing massive bribes, and most damning of all, Maddie's own testimony. Courtroom fell silent as Maddie took the stand, walking slowly but steadily to the witness box without assistance. Charles, sitting at the defense table in an expensive suit that no longer seemed to fit him properly, couldn't hide his contempt. "Mr. Whitaker, control your expressions," the judge warned, "or I'll have you removed." Maddie's testimony was devastating in its simplicity. She spoke of years of psychological manipulation, of being told she was broken and helpless, of overhearing her father confess to her mother's murder, and finally, of that day at the cliff. "He told me it was for the best," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "That I wouldn't feel pain anymore. Then he pushed my wheelchair forward, and I was falling." When the defense attorney tried to suggest she had invented these claims for attention, Maddie fixed him with a steady gaze. "Why would I want this kind of attention? Do you think I enjoyed hiding in caves, being drugged in a psychiatric facility, having my own father try to kill me twice?" The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Charles Whitaker was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for attempted murder, conspiracy, witness tampering, fraud, and a host of other charges. As he was led from the courtroom, Charles looked back. Once at Maddie, there was no remorse in his expression, only a cold anger at having lost control. The day after the verdict, Granny Mae was finally released from custody. All charges against her were dropped with formal apologies from the district attorney's office. Noah and Maddie were waiting outside the detention center when she emerged, leaning heavily on a cane but with her head held high. "Granny," Noah called, running to embrace her. "Careful there, child," she chuckled weakly. "These old bones have had enough excitement for one lifetime." When she saw Maddie, Granny Mae's eyes filled with tears. "Look at you," she whispered. "Standing, tall, just like your mother would have wanted." Maddie embraced the elderly woman who had once cared for her mother. "Thank you for never giving up on me," she said softly. Even when everyone else did, the town that had once dismissed Noah's claims now celebrated him as a hero. 2 weeks after the trial concluded, the mayor organized a community town hall to formally apologize for the institutional failures that had allowed Charles's crimes to continue for so long. The hall was packed when Maddie walked to the podium unassisted. She surveyed the crowd, faces that had once looked at her with pity now filled with respect and remorse. "I stand before you today, not as a victim," Maddie began, her voice clear and strong, "but as a survivor. What happened to me and to my mother was enabled by silence. The silence of people who suspected the truth but looked away. The silence of institutions that valued wealth over justice." She paused, finding Noah in the front row. "I'm alive because a boy didn't look away. Because when he saw something wrong, he spoke up, again and again, even when no one believed him." Noah blinked back tears as she continued. "That's the lesson we should all take from this tragedy. The courage to see the truth and speak it, no matter how powerful those who wish to hide it may be." The aftermath of the case brought changes large and small. Cora, whose academic record had been middling at best, was awarded the first Justice for Madison Scholarship, a grant established by the school board for students who demonstrated moral courage. "I don't know what to say," Cora stammered when presented with the award. "I just did what anyone should do." "But that's just it," the principal replied. "Not everyone would have done what you did. That's why it matters." Elias, who had spent years in self-imposed isolation, found himself reluctantly in the spotlight when a national magazine asked him to write about supporting trauma survivors. The article was shared widely, eventually reaching his estranged daughter in Seattle. "Dad?" a voice called from outside his newly rebuilt cabin one autumn afternoon. Elias opened the door to find a young woman, with his eyes standing there nervously. "I saw your name in an article. I've been looking for you for years." Dottie's secure platform for exposing abuse of minors in elite systems grew into a nationwide network. She hired staff, established protocols for verifying claims, and provided technical security for whistleblowers. On the About Us page, a simple statement read, "Inspired by the courage of Madison Whitaker and Noah Wilson." Isaac, who had put his law studies on hold during the crisis, received an unexpected letter from Frances Duval. She had been reinstated to the Bar Association and was opening a new firm specializing in children's rights and corruption cases. "I need an associate who's already proven they're willing to fight for justice, regardless of the odds," she wrote. "The position is yours if you want it." Charles's considerable fortune, frozen during the trial, was eventually seized through civil forfeiture. After lengthy legal proceedings, the assets were converted into a foundation for child abuse survivors. Maddie, who could have claimed a significant portion as his heir, asked only that one condition be met. "Remove the Whitaker name from everything," she instructed the trustees. "That name has caused enough pain in this world." As for Noah, his artistic talents found a new purpose. His detailed sketches documenting the case were compiled into a book titled The Boy Who Saw, with proceeds directed to trauma therapy programs for children. At the book launch, attended by everyone who had fought alongside him, Noah seemed embarrassed by the attention. "I just drew what I saw," he told reporters. "Maddie did the hard part. She survived." 1 year after Charles's conviction, Noah and Maddie returned to Eagle Point Cliff. The place that had once been the site of such horror now felt different, cleansed somehow by truth and justice. Maddie stood at the edge, not too close, looking out at the endless horizon where sea met sky. The wind tugged at her hair, longer now and healthier like the rest of her. Noah stood beside her, taller than he had been that first day, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. "Are you scared to be here?" Noah asked quietly. Maddie considered the question. "No," she said finally. "This place doesn't belong to him anymore. It's just a cliff now. Beautiful, actually, when you're not afraid." "What happens next?" Noah asked, watching a seagull dive toward the waves below. Maddie smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, something that had once been rare but was becoming more common. "We live, Noah. We go to school, make friends, have normal problems. We remember what happened, but we don't let it define us." She took a deep breath of the salty air. "This time, we came back stronger." As they turned to leave, Noah paused to open his sketchbook. The page showed a drawing of Maddie standing tall at the cliff's edge, her face turned toward the sun, unafraid. "Perfect," he said, both to the drawing and to the moment. Together, they walked away from the cliff and toward whatever the future might hold. What would you risk to speak the truth when the whole world calls you a liar? If this story of courage against corruption moved you, like, subscribe, and share to support more tales where the powerless find their voice. Because sometimes, the smallest witnesses have the most important stories to tell.